Welcome in to the PFF College Football Show. Max Chadwick alongside Dalton Wasserman here. We've made it to the Final Four of the College Football Playoff, our full semifinals preview that we got with Ole Miss taking on Miami and Indiana taking on Oregon. And Dalton, it is a pretty unusual Final Four that we have right now in the playoff. Only two of these four schools have ever won a national title, and one of those two schools in Miami won theirs in the 21st century back in 2001. Ole Miss won one back in 1962. Indiana and Oregon both have never won a national title. So it's a pretty unusual Final Four, but an awesome Final Four nonetheless.
And considering those circumstances, how excited these four fan bases must be, right? Indiana with the turnaround that they've had under Curt Cignetti the last 2 years. Oregon, having never won a national title, is
never.
That correct? I mean, and you talk about what they've been building for the last really 2 decades, honestly, through multiple different coaches, and now with Dan Lanning's building now. Miami, the U is back. They're in the Final Four. They've got a shot to win it all. And then Ole Miss with everything surrounding them and just coming off the electric quarterfinal win over Georgia behind Trinidad Chambliss. This is going to be a really exciting semifinal, and you've got 4 really good teams here.
Yeah, so many cool stories that we have right now in the College Football Playoff semifinals. By the way, what we're going to do here on the show today is going to break down both games in their entirety, the passing offense and rushing offense for both teams, against pass defense and rushing defense for both teams, as well, and of course predict who will make it to the national title game down there in Miami. Before we do that, though, I want to remind you guys right now that PFF Plus is 30% off with the promo code HOLIDAY30. This sale is still going on right now, but it won't be going on for that much longer, so make sure you guys take advantage of it right now. Again, HOLIDAY30 to take advantage of this PFF Plus sale. You get access to all the same grades, data, and analytics that every NFL and every college football team uses. And you get access to our 2026 NFL Mock Draft Simulator, our fantasy football tools, our betting tools, our player prop tool. Everything is available for 30% off right now when you use the promo code HOLIDAY30. Again, this will not last much longer, though, so take advantage of that sale right now. All right, let's kick off this semifinal preview show with the Fiesta Bowl. Number 6 Ole Miss against number 10 Miami, Thursday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. Both teams coming off of upset wins in the quarterfinal round, with the Rebels getting revenge on Georgia and beating them in what was a thrilling quarterfinal game, and Miami on New Year's Eve taking down the defending national champion in Ohio State. Again, Miami seeking its first national title game appearance since 2002, while Ole Miss is looking for its first national championship game appearance in program history. And Dalton, there's a lot of incredible storylines in this game. I mentioned before how Miami is back after, a couple decades of being a relatively good program overall, but now they're finally like a national title contender once again. And Ole Miss, even though Lane Kiffin left before the college football playoff, they are now one win away from playing for a national championship.
I just think you have two teams that are such great stories and coming from such opposite directions this season, right? Miami with a couple of losses and really trying to scratch and claw their way back, and then very controversially getting into the playoff field with their head-to-head win over Notre Dame finally mattering in the last set of rankings. But you look at that team, it's all about stability. Mario Cristobal's recruiting at a very high level, right? The trench play on the offensive and defensive lines has carried them so far, right? The veteran at quarterback in Carson Beck, the youngster at receiver in Malachi Toney, and just a team that prides itself on physically dominating their opponent versus an Ole Miss team that, number one, Trinidad Chambliss, the quarterback, is the coolest story in college football this year. Coming up from Division II, wasn't even the opening day starter. Austin Simmons gets hurt, and he takes the job, takes the reins, and never looks back, and puts together an electric performance last week against Georgia. The circumstances surrounding Lane Kiffin, the coaching staff, even in this game, who's coaching and who isn't, right? Which assistants are staying? It sounds like Charlie Weiss Jr., the big name and offensive coordinator, is going to stay and coach this game and beyond if they get past this game. And then just in general, the road that they've taken to to get here and everything they've had to go through, and it continuing to show that poise, especially behind Chambliss at quarterback. It's been so much fun to watch both of these teams, and the contrast in style, right? The tempo and the up-tempo, the offense, the flash of Ole Miss, and then the physicality of Miami. This creates a really great matchup between two talented football teams, but they do it in very different ways.
Absolutely, yeah. You got a school in Ole Miss right now, like you said, as a former Division II quarterback playing for the team right now, trying to look for another national title to winning a Division II national title at Ferris State, plus a brand new head coach, and Pete Golding, too, is now in his third career game ever as a head coach in the college football playoff semifinals. And then for a Miami team, you're right, that had a great win over Notre Dame, then a couple losses they had later on in the season. They got into the playoff, and thank God they did, honestly, because this is the kind of ceiling that Miami can show. So, yeah, it's going to be really, really cool to see these two programs go head-to-head. Let's start off with the Ole Miss offense, Dalton, with the guy that you just mentioned a lot, Trinidad Chambliss, who was phenomenal in the win over Georgia. But now you're going up against a Miami defense and a great Miami secondary and an even better Miami defensive line. What should we know about this matchup with Trinidad Chambliss against this Miami defense?
I mean, when you talk about this Miami team, the first thing you talk about is their defensive line and how are they going to work around it. Now, I think at its core, I think Ole Miss can create they can create some advantages with tempo and with Chambliss' ability to get rid of the football quickly, but there are going to be moments in this game where he's under pressure and he's going to have to be safe with the football and escape pressure and make plays outside the pocket. Now, Chambliss, because he gets rid of the football so quickly, so often, an average time to throw right around 2.6 seconds for the season, he can work around it in the quick passing game, but also when he is under pressure, he is now the highest graded quarterback in college football, the sixth best passing grade. 8.4 yards per attempt. Just a 1% turnover-worthy play rate is elite stuff. So he's a big-time playmaker, and he also doesn't put the football in danger outside the pocket and when under pressure. And the second-best rushing grade at any time, he can scramble for a first down as well. That's what makes him so good outside the pocket and beyond that 2.5-second mark. That's really, again, I've said it all year, it's been the difference between him and Austin Simmons. Simmons can win from the pocket. Chambliss has the ability to win when extending plays. That's going to happen against a Miami team that leads the nation, or is tied, I should say, with Texas Tech for the national lead in pass rush grade. Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor have just been absolutely dominant through the first two games of the college football playoff for Miami. So that is really going to be the task. And with the Hurricanes, it's not just their four-man rush, right? When you talk about Bain and Mesidor off the edge and guys like Ahmad Moten on the inside, you got to look out for the blitz packages too, especially Keontae Scott from that nickel spot. He's made a huge impact as a blitzer already through two games, bothering Marcel Reed for Texas A&M, bothering Julian Sayin in the pocket for Ohio State. I believe it was 5 sacks that they got on Julian Sayin last week against Ohio State. So when you really look at this matchup, it's just about Trinidad Chambliss controlling the game, once again keeping his poise, and working around imminent pressure. Chambliss is the second least pressured quarterback in college football, but I guarantee you he's going to have a little more pressure than about the 22% that he's used to dealing with in all of his other games.
Yeah, so I have the Ole Miss run game in this one. I'm looking at a very similar matchup, and really it's just, okay, can Kewan Lacey in this game generate a lot of yards after contact? And listen, he's been one of the best running backs in college football this year. He has 23 rushing touchdowns right now, 5 more than any other running back in the Power 4. Over 1,400 rushing yards, are third in the country. He's also third in the nation with 88 broken tackles, and he's fifth in the country with over 980 yards after contact. And those two numbers, the broken tackle number and his yards after contact number, in my opinion, are very critical for this game, because while he has been a star, he has not received that much help from the Ole Miss offensive line. Right now, the Rebels have a 57.4 run blocking grade this year. That's only 85th in college football. They only average 1.6 yards before contact per carry. That's 74th in the country, and it's not going to get easier against one of the best defensive lines in college football. Right now, Miami has a 93.3 defensive line grade and an 89.3 run defense grade from their defensive line. Both of those numbers are second to only Texas Tech among all defensive lines in college football right now. Miami also 13th in the country with only 1.1 rushing yards before contact per attempt allowed. So I think Kewan Lacey is going to have to shed a lot of tackles at or near the line of scrimmage in this game in order for him to be successful on the ground against Miami.
And it was a grind again in the last game against Georgia, too. Kejuan Lacey, 95 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, lost a fumble that went the other way for a Georgia touchdown, and he only forced 1 missed tackle in that game, right? And Lacey's among the national leaders in missed tackles forced, and he's going to run after contact very well, but it gets hard when those defenses are swarming on you like that. I think the question for Ole Miss last week, 108 yards was enough on the ground to keep them in the game. Can they put together a similar or maybe a little bit better performance, getting that 120, 130-yard range? And Chambliss is a big part of this too now as a read option threat and even as a scrambler. They won that game last week, and he made all those plays with his arm, but he only had 14 rushing yards, right? So you talk about Chambliss being a dangerous threat, and I think the read option part of it is going to be very important to this Ole Miss offense in this game. You have to find a way to make Miami's defensive line hesitate just a little. Just make them hesitate. If they crash, keep the football, take your 10 yards, and get on with it. I think Chambliss also plays a big part in that. He's going to need more than 14 rushing yards in this game to win this one.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the Ole Miss offense in this game. Or sorry, Miami offense in this game, Dalton. You have the Miami run game with Mark Fletcher and that great offensive line. What should we know in that matchup?
Very quietly, Ole Miss, they don't get enough credit for how good the run defense has been this year. Now, there's a lot of numbers, yards per carry and different things like that are closer to average, and if you can break that first level, then you can have a lot of success. I think their second-level defenders could struggle to tackle Mark Fletcher if he can get up there in this game, but their defensive line has been really good this year. I think the 2 guys in the middle, number 51 and 52, Xavier Harris and Will Eccles, they really control things between the tackles. They're really active up front. When you look at Ole Miss defensive line, they're 4th in the nation in run defense grade. They have the most run stops and the 3rd most tackles for loss or no gain. You've got to be physical at the line of scrimmage, and I think those 2 guys at defensive tackle really are the key. You got guys like, Cam Franklin and Centarian Perkins who have been really good off the edge as well, but to me, Eccles and Harris in the middle are going to be the big key against a Miami offensive line that is 15th in the nation in run blocking grade. They're 31st in impact run block percentage. They get a high rate of positively graded blocks when you talk about that. So I think, they got size up front. It's a huge offense. Markel Bell at left tackle's a monster. Inez Cooper at guard's been a monster. Francis Mauanoa's going to get taken in the first round. And it's a direct approach, a straight line approach that they beat Texas A&M with right down the pipe with those duo runs, all those double teams up front. And they were the more physical team than Ohio State in their last game as well. So when you look at the matchup, as always, Miami is going to try to control the pace of this game with their offensive line and with Mark Fletcher. It's going to be a task, especially for this Ole Miss defensive line. Can Will Eccles and Xavier Harris in the middle overcome those double teams? Ohio State couldn't do it last week, even with Caden McDonald. If those 2 guys can't do it, then Miami's going to get their run game going with Fletcher, and they're going to control time of possession, which I think could be their greatest asset in this game.
Yeah, it's all about the offensive line for Miami in the run game, and it's all about the offensive line for Miami in the pass game too, because feels like the millionth time we talked about today is about, can Ole Miss find a way to pressure Carson Beck? And Carson Beck has been, honestly, the most difficult quarterback in America to put under consistent pressure this year because, one, he plays behind the best pass-blocking offensive line in college football. Right now, Miami leads the nation with an 87.6 team pass-blocking grade this year, and Carson Beck gets rid of the football at 2.35 second average, the 3rd fastest time to throw in college football. You combine those 2 factors, and right now Carson Beck has only been under pressure about 16% of the time this year. The next closest school, ironically, is Ole Miss at 21% this year too. So Carson Beck has easily been the least pressured quarterback in college football this year. On the rare occasion when he is under pressure, his production has dipped right now. He's an 82.6 PFF grade when kept clean, only a 45.7 when under duress this year. That's 91st in college football. Now, Ole Miss is only 83rd in the nation in pass rush grade this year. And they rarely send a blitz at quarterbacks either, with only a 27% blitz rate, which is 120th in college football. I think Ole Miss in this game needs to defend the screens really well, got to defend the short and intermediate levels of the field where Carson Beck so often likes to throw the football. If you do that and you force Carson Beck to hold on to the football for a tick longer than he wants to, maybe, just maybe, your defensive line can get home and force him into those mistakes that he usually makes when he's under pressure. So I'm looking at the Ole Miss secondary in this game, and of course looking at the Ole Miss defensive line in this game. And okay, can the secondary hold up and cover just enough? And can the defensive line win quickly against what has been the best offensive line in America at protecting the quarterback?
Miami has won their first 2 playoff games, largely working around Carson Beck and only asking him to come through in, say, big third down, third and medium type moments, right? Otherwise, it's been control the pace, run the ball, punt the football. They are going to need more from Carson Beck to win this game because you're not going to shut out Ole Miss, okay? That's just not how that's going to work. Their offense is too good. They got too many weapons. Can you hold them to a reasonable number and not give up 39 like Georgia did last week? Absolutely, but they're not going to shut out Ole Miss, so they're going to need Beck, and this has got to be, to me, the breakout game for Malachi Toney, and he's gotten an opportunity to do that. I mentioned leading into the preview of Ole Miss and Georgia that Ole Miss struggles defending outside out towards the numbers. Malachi Toney loves a lot of those outbreaking routes, and you mentioned it, the screen game, the RPO game. This game is really the best opportunity of their 3 playoff games for Miami to run the full depth of their offense, especially in the passing game, right? Texas A&M, really disciplined, really good zone defense. Third down defense is unbelievable under Mike Elko. Ohio State is still one of the best defenses in the country, and they only gave up 17 points offensively. Beck with about 130 passing yards in that game. They're going to need a little more. They need a little more balance in this game, especially if the tempo starts to pick up, because, Max, I do think something that is going to tell a lot about this game. Which tempo do we get? Ole Miss runs the 6th most offensive plays per game in the country. Miami's 98th in that category. If it slows down and it feels like we're going under the point total and Miami's really milking the clock for 6 or 7 minutes at a time, then you like the Hurricanes. If we start getting into a track meet now, which I think is possible, and Ole Miss, I think the tempo of the way they play can give Miami problems and at least try to wear out this elite defensive line. I think Miami, it's going to be very crucial for them to A, have balance, and B, slow it down. You know the best way to defend Chambliss, really? Keep him on the sideline.
Yeah.
That's what Miami's goal is going to be. I think if they win this game, Beck is big on third down again. They obviously run the football well, and they hold the ball for at least 35 minutes.
So, Dalton, 2 teams that not a lot of people thought would even be here in the college football playoff semifinals right now. 2 teams right now that are on magical runs in the college football playoff. Who will continue their magical run all the way to the national title game?
I think because of the amount of talent on the field. Miami's defense, Trinidad Chambliss and the receivers, and then just the contrasting style of these 2 teams makes this game so hard to pick. This is one I really think this is one of the hardest games that we've had to pick all season. And they're evenly matched, but in a way that it's because they're so different, right? And I don't think Miami, and Mario Cristobal's even said this, they haven't seen a team like this year. They're talented first and foremost, especially offensively. They're so wide open, and if they do get, if Ole Miss can get that first down each drive, and they can get into the tempo, what's the one thing I kept screaming during the Miami-Ohio State game? Go. If I'm Ohio State's offense, go. Get on the gas. Don't just let these guys get 35 seconds of rest, Bain and Mesidor especially, and then just tee off on you. Ohio State only ran 60 plays in that game.
Yeah.
Ole Miss averages almost 78. It's a different tempo. I think it's extremely hard to pick. I could honestly flip a coin. There's advantages and disadvantages for both teams. I'm taking the quarterback. Give me Trinidad Chambliss. Wow. I think he's got one more in him. It's Ole Miss against the world, especially with all their coaching situations. And Pete Golding, man, he's got this team just playing with the right attitude. I'm copping out with the 1-pointer. Ole Miss 28, Miami 27.
I have the winning team also scoring 28 points in this game, but I have Miami winning this game. I have a 28-21 Miami over Ole Miss. I think Trinidad Chambliss, his heroics can keep Ole Miss in this game, but ultimately I think that Miami is going to overwhelm Ole Miss in the trenches, both on the offensive line and the defensive line. I think Miami has the advantage in both aspects, and we saw in that Ohio State game, if you have the advantage of the trenches on both sides of the ball, you can beat anyone. And I think Miami has the distinct advantage in the trenches on both sides of the ball. So I like the Hurricanes to win this game 28-21 and advance to the national championship game. So Should be an awesome Fiesta Bowl that we get on Thursday night, and an even better one that we get potentially on Friday between Indiana and Oregon. Before we get to that, though, got to talk about what the sponsor of the show, that is Western and Southern. Our game plan of the week is presented by Western and Southern Financial Group, a game plan for your financial future. Honestly, if you look at that Miami and Ole Miss game, I'm really curious to see how Pete Golding is going to try to drop maybe some more blitzes than they usually do at Ole Miss, just drop some pressure to put Carson Beck under duress in that game and force him potentially into some mistakes. And just like every team win starts with a great game plan, your future should too. With life insurance built like a championship roster, Western and Southern helps protect you and your family so you can focus on winning today knowing tomorrow is covered. Whether you're just starting out, building your dynasty, or looking to lock in long-term protection, their coverage options are designed to match your game plan. Visit westernsouthern.com/PFF to get your free life quote and start building your financial game plan today. Western and Southern, built to win, backed by over 130 years of helping people protect what matters most. All right, next up we got the Peach Bowl between Indiana and Oregon, a rematch in the college football playoff semifinals on Friday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. Both teams were favored to win their quarterfinal games, and unlike Miami and Ole Miss, both favorites won those games as well in convincing fashion as well, because Alabama got dominated by Indiana in the Rose Bowl, and the Ducks shut out Texas Tech in the Orange Bowl as well. Again, this is a rematch from Week 7, back when Indiana went on the road to Eugene and beat Oregon by a 30-20 final score. Indiana trying to advance to its first national championship game in program history. Oregon trying to make it back to the national title game for the first time since 2014.
Do you think there's some draft scouts that are going to be watching this game?
Man.
Especially out there in Las Vegas and New York all of a sudden. My New York Jets are probably going to be they probably got this game on the big screen for sure. But, oh, no, I mean, you couldn't ask for much better. It was a really good first game between these two teams in Eugene back in Week 7. Indiana getting that win as they've won every game this season and coming off both. Actually, I'll give them both credit. What dominant outings these two teams both just played in the quarterfinal. Obviously, Oregon, it was a little bit ugly because you got to deal with Texas Tech's defense, but 23-0 in that game. And then, boy, what Indiana did to Alabama in the Rose Bowl. That sure makes you believe they're the best team in the country and obviously well-deserving of that top ranking. But this is going to be fun because you've always got the rematch factor, right? When you got to play a really good team a second time, what is it going to look like? What are the adjustments? And if you're Indiana, to me, a big question and a lot of facets is, can you physically dominate this team? Because this is the one team all year that physically dominated Oregon. Can you do it a second time, or does Oregon have the adjustments? And is Dante Moore going to learn from some of his mistakes in the first game?
Absolutely. All right, let's start off with the Indiana offense in this game. Dalton, you actually have the run game against Oregon's run defense. What should we know about that side of the ball?
Yeah, interesting enough, when I went back and watched this the first time around, and look, Indiana's run game is not all that complicated. It's a lot of inside zone. It's a lot of duo. It's a lot of just, let's line up and execute, and our offensive line is better than it was last year. Hell, they were the MVP, that unit, Pat Coogan and those guys up front. They were the MVP of the Rose Bowl against Alabama for the way they ran the football last week. But you rewind it to Week 7, 59.5 rushing grade for Indiana in that game against Oregon, their lowest of the season, just 3.3 yards per carry, just 1 yard before contact per carry, 4 missed tackles forced, and not a single run of at least 15 yards in that game. Dan Lanning and this defense, they do such a great job of preventing explosive runs. It's one of the best parts of their defense. And to me, when I watched it, it was really the guys in the middle of their defense, the two big defensive tackles, Bear Alexander and Amari Washington, really won the battle for the most part in the run game in that first one. And then you got that group of linebackers, Bryce Betcher, Jerry Mixon, Devin Jackson, did a great job of cleaning things up behind those guys. So I really am curious to see if Indiana can run the ball between the tackles as well as they did against Alabama. They would dominate this game if they do that again, and better than they did last time against Oregon. I think really the two defensive tackles, kind of like I talked about in the Ole Miss game with their defense against Miami's offense, I think Amari Washington and Bear Alexander play a big part in occupying those double teams and occupying all those gaps up front to free up the linebackers, to free up the safeties on the back end. Aaron Flowers, Dylan Thieneman tackling so well in the run game too. That's a big key to me. Can they work around Alexander and Washington, or is a lot of the pressure going to be on Mendoza in the passing game in third and long situations?
Yeah, so I have the Indiana passing game in this one, Fernando Mendoza and the Hoosiers, and I'm kind of looking at him and also the Indiana offensive line in this game. Can they hold up a little bit more than they did in their last outing against Oregon? Because even though Indiana won that game, it wasn't really the best outing from Fernando Mendoza out there. He only had a 49.4 passing grade in the win over Oregon with 0 big-time throws and 1 turnover-worthy play, and that 1 turnover-worthy play ended up being a pick six for Oregon as well. It was the second worst passing grade of the year, and you can see that bottom line right there. Indiana only a 48.3 pass blocking grade for the Hoosiers in that one too, which was, again, their second worst of the season, ahead of only, I believe, the Penn State game for them. And Oregon in that game dialed up a lot of blitzes. They blitzed Fernando Mendoza over 41% of the time in that game. So I think Fernando Mendoza against pressure and against blitzes is going to be really interesting to watch in this one, because even though he wasn't very good against Oregon, he's actually been great against pressure and against blitzes this year. In fact, his 71.4 passing grade against pressure is the best among all Power 4 quarterbacks this year. He has an 86 passing grade when blitzed this year. That's 8th in the entire country. So you got a red-hot Mendoza right now who's coming off back-to-back career-high performances in terms of PFF grade against Ohio State, and then he broke his career high against Alabama in the Rose Bowl. So he is red-hot right now, going up against a great Oregon pass rush and a great Oregon secondary. But again, Mendoza had a sub-50 passing grade back in that Week 7 win over Oregon. It wasn't really his best outing. I'm looking at, okay, can he be better in this one against the blitzes? Because I feel like Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoi are going to drop a lot of blitzes considering how well it worked out in the first game.
Yeah, and I'll certainly get into how Dante Moore will handle pressure in just a minute, because that's really the key to the game for both quarterbacks. But you mentioned it, and so this is a great example of so often, people go, well, who's got the best pass rush? And the next question will be, well, who's got the most sacks, of course? Well, Mendoza was only sacked once in that game, but under pressure 38% of the time, which is a relatively high amount. And that pick six caught by none other than Brandon Finney, the great true freshman corner, right? You're talking about the pressure getting to him a little bit and the different looks on defense getting to him a little bit. And it's really, again, I'll go over it in a second. It's the same way with Dante Moore. Which of these quarterbacks is going to handle dynamic front sevens, right, especially in those third and long situations? It's a great point you make about Mendoza, and whoever makes those adjustments is probably going to win this game.
So let's talk about Dante Moore, the other candidate to potentially be QB1 in the NFL draft other than Fernando Mendoza. What should we know? Because it was, honestly, Dalton, it was probably his worst game of the season against Indiana. What should we know about him in this matchup?
It absolutely was. And Moore was also one who really cracked under the pressure that Indiana was sending at him. And Indiana, look, they make college quarterbacks do doctorate level things. Brian Haynes, Indiana's defensive coordinator, deserves a lot of credit for all of the creative pressures. Not only are they obviously really good, right? Guys like Mikael Kamara up front, he got 7 pressures in that first game, but they really know how to confuse quarterbacks, how to rotate coverages, how to send simulated pressures where, a quarterback thinks it's coming from one way and it's actually the blitz is coming from another, and then the whole coverage is rotating. They mess with your eyes as much as any defense in college football. And Dante Moore, this was the one game in Week 7 where we really saw him throwing off his back foot, not sure of himself, right? Because when he's throwing confidently, boy, he can throw with anybody, right? That's why he might be the number one pick in the draft. But season low, 46.6 passing grade in that first game, 6 sacks, and look at that. You just mentioned 38% pressure rate for Mendoza. How about almost 48 for Dante Moore? That's almost impossible to work with. And that last number, that's something I'm going to go over in a separate film breakdown as well. 1 deep completion for Dante Moore. Dante Moore is the highest graded deep passer. That's 20-plus yard targets in the country, a 98.8 passing grade on deep targets. But the games where Oregon's offense has struggled, are the ones where you have teams that play a lot of zone coverage and they don't allow free access to those deep shots. Indiana plays more zone coverage than any team in the country. And when you look at some of those games where Oregon stayed within reach and possibly could have lost or did lose this game, right? This one. The Iowa game, right? They prevent explosives as much as anybody. The Penn State game, you guys did a good job of holding down the deep ball. Now, he earned it, but you made him work for it, that's for sure. And even last week against Texas Tech, I think he only had one deep completion in that game as well, and Texas Tech sat back and made him work for it while the pass rush was winning. This is a formula, if there is any, to beating Dante Moore. You have to make him work for it. Are you going to shut him out? No, you're not. He's too good for that. But can Oregon create more deep shots down the field? Or can Dante Moore make the adjustment this time to working underneath, working to the chains, and manufacturing offense? It was better last week against Texas Tech, and that's a monster of a defense to deal with, but this is another one, and I think a similar strategy is going to need to be deployed here as far as manufacturing first downs, because Indiana, believe they've only given up 13 deep completions all season, and 3 of them were to Ohio State. So it's going to be tough to hit those home run shots. Can he succeed without them?
Yeah, and that was one of the few defenses that could really get home consistently on Dante Moore, considering Oregon right now has the second best pass blocking grade in college football right now. And yeah, Dante Moore, who's been so good this year, he and that Oregon offense can only put up really 13 points against Indiana in that first game. Remember, 7 of those points came off a pick 6 for Oregon. So they scored 20 points total, really only 13 came from the offense. I have the run game for Oregon in this one too against Indiana's run defense, which really is strength on strength, right? Because Oregon's run game has been one of the best in college football this year. Indiana's run defense has been one of the best in college football this year. And in the first matchup, Indiana had success against Oregon. But on the season, Oregon generates .163 EPA per run, second in the Power 4. 93.8 rushing grade is tied for the best in the Power 4 as well. It's got a great offensive line and 3 really, really good running backs to rely on in Noah Whittington, Jordan Davison, and De'Aaron Hill Jr. The Ducks, though, against Indiana, they failed to get much going. Negative .139 EPA per run, their third worst game of the year. Only 116 rushing yards. It was the only game all season where Oregon failed to have a rushing touchdown, and only 3 broken tackles by Oregon in this game on about 24 carries. And honestly, the offensive line did a decent job overall. It generated about 2 yards before contact per attempt. The running backs, Indiana was not missing any tackles out there, honestly. So Indiana did a great job of fitting up the run and not missing any tackles either. So I'm really looking at the 3 running backs in this game, in Whittington, in Davison, and in Hill. Can they break more tackles against what has been one of the best tackling teams in the country, one of the best run defending teams in the country, a very sound run defense overall. Oregon, which has had an elite run game all year, they have got to be better and have got to support Dante Moore more than they did back in Week 7.
No, absolutely. 2 things you just mentioned there. They're sound. There is not a team. They're not just very good at it. I don't believe there is a team better in college football at run fits and being where they're supposed to be than Indiana. And I think a lot of that starts with just 3 outstanding linebackers, Aiden Fisher, Isaiah Jones, Elijah Hardy. They are always where they need to be. So when you talk about Oregon and a very good Oregon offensive line being where they need to be, that means they need to get to the second level. The first blocking at the first level is cool, right? We talk about it all the time. Good offensive lines block at the first level. Great offensive lines block at the second level. You've got those 3 linebackers. And then I'll tell you another guy who's a big impact guy, the safety/nickel, Devin Boykin. He's actually their highest graded run defender. He was one of their best players on the field last week against Alabama. This is somebody who really impacts the game at the second level. How about a 93.4 run defense grade for Devin Boykin, the safety on the season? That second level is where this game is going to be won. Oregon needs more explosive runs as well if they're going to win this game, and they have to prove that they're more physical than last time, because again, I think the theme of the game last time was both quarterbacks struggling under pressure a bit, but really Indiana was the more physical team for 60 minutes. Oregon has to make up that gap, and they have to make it up in the run game.
All right, Dalton, ultimately, in a rematch from Week 7, will Indiana once again take down Oregon and advance to the national championship game, or will Oregon get revenge on the Hoosiers and advance to their first national title game in about 11 years?
It is such a fascinating game because of the possibility for adjustments made from the first one, right? What did both coaching staffs learn? What did both quarterbacks learn? What did both defenses learn? That even though both defenses played a pretty good game, how can they be even better than last time, right? And I think you've got this dynamic. And also, like we saw last time, Mendoza with the pick six, Moore threw 2 interceptions. Can either defense force the other elite quarterback, maybe the 2 best quarterbacks in the country, can they force them into another backbreaking mistake, right? You almost had it. We almost had the backbreaker with that Finney pick six, and then Indiana came down and scored again, right? But what is going to happen there, and which quarterback can see the field better against 2 great defenses? At the end of the day, I do think Indiana is the best team in the country. I think they're the better team in this game. I think they get it done again. It's very hard to beat a team twice. But the one thing I still question for Oregon, and this almost goes back to the beginning of the year, I need somebody in their receiving core to really step up and have like a huge game, right? Oregon this year, they only have 2 games from any individual all year where someone had 100 receiving yards. And both of those were Malik Benson in each of their last 2 games, actually, against Washington and James Actually, I shouldn't say the last 2 games, not Texas Tech, but against Washington and James Madison. Those are the only 2 100-yard receiving days that Oregon's had the entire season. Is it Benson? Is it DeCorian Moore? Is it Kenyon Sadiq? I need somebody on this.
Maybe Evan Stewart.
Maybe it's Evan Stewart if he's healthy enough to go. I kind of need somebody to step up for Oregon and go for $120 in this game if they're going to win. I'm not sure it's going to happen, especially with as sound as Indiana is in coverage. I'm a little worried about the receiving core. I like Indiana's a little better with Surratt and Cooper and Becker on the outside. Give me the Hoosiers 31-24.
I have Indiana winning as well. I think it's going to be a coin flip. I have it 27-24. I was so impressed by how Indiana found a way to win that last game in Week 7. And I think, like you said, Dalton, Indiana right now is playing like the best team in college football right now. So I'm going to take Fernando Mendoza. I'm going to take the Hoosiers to take down the Ducks once again in the college football playoff. And Indiana moves one step away from the program's first ever national championship. So my predicted national title game is Indiana against Miami. Dalton's is Indiana against Ole Miss. Let us know in the comments below what you think the national championship game will be. We're not done on this show just yet because after we do a couple ad reads, we're actually going to go over a flurry of transfer portal news that we've gotten very, very recently. And it's been kind of a wild transfer portal that we've gotten so far with actually a lot of news surrounding some of these programs that are still playing in the college football playoff right now. Before we get to everything about the transfer portal, though, we've got to talk about DraftKings Sportsbook. This PFF betting segment is brought to you by DraftKings. Lines and odds are subject to change. I kind of like, honestly, Miami minus 3 in that bowl game, Dalton. I know that you kind of like Ole Miss in that game, but I think Miami against Ole Miss is my pick to win. I think they should cover that 3-point spread. And DraftKings Sportsbook, which is an official sports betting partner, by the way, of the NFL, they make every playoff moment feel bigger. DraftKings has your back with early exit protection. If the player in your eligible NFL prop bet goes down at any point in the first half, you still get paid in cash. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code PFF. That's code PFF to turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. New York, call 888-789-7777, HOPE-NY, or text HOPE-NY as well. Connecticut, call 888-789-7777, or visit ccpg.org. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino in Kansas, wager tax pass-through may apply in Illinois. 21 plus in most states, void in Ontario. Restrictions apply. Bet must win to receive bonus bets, which expire in 7 days. Minimum odds required. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. Limited time offer. All right, before we get to, again, the transfer portal news, also want to remind you guys right now of the PFF player prop tool, which once again is 30% off when you use the promo code HOLIDAY30.
Everyone's got takes. Numbers have truth. And the truth is, most people are betting with emotion. Sportsbooks feed on it. TikTok gurus sell it. The hype machine runs on it. That's how you lose. PFF is different. You're betting with winning data. The same data trusted by all 32 NFL teams and the sharpest minds in the game. PFF betting tools take every prop, every matchup, every angle, and run them through our custom models. Built on the best football data in the world. What comes back is your edge. Simple, sharp, and built to win. Want to go deeper? PFF puts a pro-level analytics department in your hands, giving you the same insights teams use to find every advantage. Build your game plan with matchup analysis. Project every snap, every matchup, and every edge before kickoff. Because the smartest plays start long before Sunday. Hit rates show how a player performs against their prop and against defenses built the same way. It's the data that gives you real confidence in every pick. Next, Key Insights translates PFF data into the story behind every matchup, giving you the why that powers your bets. From coverage schemes to defensive looks, it's the context that turns raw numbers into winning decisions. When you're ready to take action, filter through every prop on the market and focus on the opportunities that matter, by game, matchup, or value. Then, shop for the best available line in your area and tap your book of choice to place the bet instantly. Everyone's got takes, but now you've got truth. Bet with data, win with PFF.
Jeez.
Once again, that player prop tool is available for 30% off right now with the promo code HOLIDAY30. All right, Dalton, let's talk about the transfer portal right now, which has been going crazy lately. The bunch of big stories going on right now. What has stood out to you so far in the early days of the transfer portal?
I think there's a handful of teams for sure. I think you get the case of coaches, a head coach especially, leaving one program and moving to another. I think we've seen a few cases of that. You know, some lower profile ones, a lot of the Memphis guys going with Ryan Silverfield to Arkansas. We were just talking during the break there about a lot of the Southern Miss guys going with Charles Huff to Memphis. But two of the high profile ones I think we need to talk about are all the Iowa State crew. Most of the Iowa State crew, because we were talking about one or two of them that didn't go, but most of that Iowa State Cyclones crew going with Matt Campbell to your Penn State Nittany Lions. You talk about the quarterback, Rocco Beck, the running back, Carson Hansen, wide receivers, Brett Eskildson and Chase Sowell. Both tight ends that made their 12 personnel so effective. And we know Matt Campbell, he's going to want to keep that, going into the Big Ten and playing that two tight end style. Ben Bramer and Gabe Burkle, Caleb Bacon, a really good linebacker, Marcus Neal, number 31 at safety for him last year, one of my favorite players in the country. So you see Matt Campbell obviously putting together the foundation of this team. Curious, you especially as the Penn State guy, what you think of this and kind of where this direction and where this is going with Matt Campbell.
I think it's smart, honestly. I think Penn State always needed to have a volume approach in the transfer portal, considering just how many players they were losing, honestly. And I think Matt Campbell bringing in a lot of guys that he's familiar with is smart. And I think Rocco Beck, it makes sense that he wants to bring him in. I think Rocco Beck has been a pretty solid quarterback at Iowa State for the last couple of years or so. So, yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I'm not surprised by it by any bit. I was kind of expecting a lot of Iowa State Cyclones to follow Matt Campbell. I was kind of hoping maybe Jontez Williams would follow him to Penn State, but he in fact went to a different Big Ten school in USC. So yeah, I like the approach from Matt Campbell. I'm kind of excited to see what this kind of Penn State Cyclones team looks like next year with all the different Iowa State players that's following him. You mentioned another one, Dalton, Eric Morris at Oklahoma State now. He is bringing in a lot of the same players from North Texas, and honestly, I am very, very pleased with how this Oklahoma State Cowboys team is looking right now.
The Oklahoma State Mean Green.
The Mean Green, really. Because you look at this, Drew Mestemaker, one of the top players in the portal, the quarterback. He's going to Oklahoma State. Caleb Hawkins, who is going to be probably a top 5 running back in the country going into next year. He's going to Oklahoma State. Wyatt Young, there's a lot of talk about him maybe going to Michigan. He instead goes to Oklahoma State as well. So I'm a huge fan of this approach from Eric Morris, and I'm a huge fan of bringing in all of those guys, especially those first 3 guys right there in Mestemaker, Hawkins, and Young. Those are 3 superstars. I believe all 3 of them, Dalton, were in our top 10 overall players in the transfer portal for a school like Oklahoma State, which has fallen on hard times in recent years. Getting those three types of players could almost immediately turn around this program.
Oh, Oklahoma State's going to be better next year because they're going to be more talented. Now, I think the question is what else Eric Morris is going to bring in on defense, but that's not even the end of the list right there. Those are just the big names when you talk about your starting quarterback, your star tailback, your number one receiver, and one of the most productive receivers in the country, your starting left tackle, multiple defensive backs. I think really the defense will be a question, but Oklahoma State's going to be better. They've got so much more talent. Eric Morris is doing a great job, and not only they have more talent, these guys are going to be a year older, and they're going to be playing together in the same system. There's going to be a turnaround there pretty quick if Eric Morris just gets that team to execute right at that level like they did in the American, but they could play with a lot of teams this year, especially with how much they can score. And one other note on the Penn State one, the other running back from Iowa State, Abu Sama, he chose to go to Wisconsin instead of following along to Penn State. So right now, it sure does look like Carson Hansen's backfield back there. Maybe you got to add another one into that mix.
Yeah, we'll see what Penn State does at running back. I believe there's some good young kids in that backfield too, so we'll see what they do there. How about a school, Dalton, that's still playing right now in the college football playoff? Indiana has been very, very busy in the transfer portal. Once again, bringing in a new quarterback after Curtis Rourke in year one under Curt Cignetti, and of course the Heisman winner in Fernando Mendoza in year two. Well, they got Josh Hoover coming in year three, the TCU quarterback as well. Big fan of Nick Marsh, who's a really, really good player after the catch. Parker Livingstone following them as well from Texas, the wide receiver too. Yeah, again, Dalton, Curt Cignetti, who is, of course, very, very busy right now prepping for Oregon in the semifinals, but that has not stopped him or the Hoosiers from having a very successful transfer portal so far.
And it's funny because he's even said as much. He goes, this is taking a lot of hours of my day, and I'm staying on campus working longer than I usually would because of the portal and hosting these guys on visits, but man, they added on top of that, they added Chidi Obiizor, also the defensive lineman from Kansas State, another defensive lineman from Kansas State. But especially yesterday when all these commitments were coming one after the other, I'm like, dude, Kurt, calm down, man. You're gonna take all of them. I mean, he's on absolute fire. He's already got his Fernando Mendoza replacement and Josh Hoover, who honestly, a lot of the same way that I felt about Mendoza this past summer this past spring, I should say, when they got him to commit. I feel that way about Hoover. Do I think he's, at the time, I didn't think Mendoza was the best QB in the country. Ended up being that. I don't think Hoover's the best QB in the country. But he's going to fit that team just fine, right? And you talk about there's a potential for losing Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper, and you replace him with Nick Marsh, who led the Power 4 and missed tackles force this year, and Parker Livingston, who we saw do a lot of really good things in the SEC for Texas. Turbo Richard from Boston College, really solid running back to keep that run game going. And then the defensive pieces. We know this Indiana team with Cignetti, Brian Haynes, the defensive coordinator. They're going to get this defense rolling. They're doing an A-plus job in the portal right now while they're trying to make a national title run. Indiana's on fire, man. This is how they're going to build their team every single year, and they're doing a great job of it.
Let's actually go to another school that is not playing in the semifinals, but actually lost in the quarterfinal round. But once again, a team that built their roster, it felt like through the portal, that led to a Big 12 title and a college football playoff quarterfinal appearance. And they're once again building through the portal once again, Dalton, and that is the Texas Tech Red Raiders, who brought in one of the top quarterbacks in the portal in Brendan Sorsby. They brought in one of the top linebackers in the portal as well in Austin Romaine, and they don't seem to be done yet right now because it looks like right now Mateen Ibaragba, the Wake Forest D tackle, is not committed just yet, but there's a lot of talk right now that he might be going to Texas Tech too. So it does not seem like Texas Tech is going to be done in the portal just yet, and it seems like this is a program that is here to stay the way they're spending right now in the portal.
Well, the headliner here is Sorsby. He's rumored to be getting somewhere around $5 million to play at Texas Tech next year, and honestly, I had somebody on Twitter ask me, okay, what do you think the difference is between Sorsby and a Baron Morton? And to me, he adds more of a dynamic ability to run the football. He's a better athlete than Morton. Now, the question is going to be, can he throw it through the top-level defenses in the Big 12 and really throughout the country? But much, much better receiving core he's going to be working with at Texas Tech than he had here in Cincinnati the last couple years. So I do think think there is potential for Sorsby to hit another level as a passer and add to the run game, right? Jacoby Williams coming back in the backfield. I think when you talk about adding mobility to the quarterback position at Texas Tech, it's going to be a big help. We saw it in flashes this year with Will Hammond when he was playing, right? The better athlete, the run game really got going even more than it did most weeks with Baron Morton out there. And then you look at, I'll tell you what, you think Joey McGuire's established an identity on this team with this front seven? You could not do better in having to replace Jacob Rodriguez than going and getting Austin Romaine from Kansas State. On top of Trey White is a really good pass rusher from San Diego State. And if he gets Mateen Ibaragba, boy, yeah, this Texas Tech team is going to be right back at the top of these defensive rankings. We've seen Cody Campbell, the big investor, the last few days on Twitter really talking about, hey, we're going to create a dynasty in Lubbock. Transfer portal is a good way to do it, and with some of these players they've gotten, you start to believe them.
Definitely. Yeah, big fan of what Texas Tech is doing in the transfer portal right now. We actually have a couple big announcements too, Dalton, from guys potentially staying at school. Isaac Brown definitely will be staying at Louisville, which is a huge, huge get for the Cardinals, who actually already got their quarterback too, and Lincoln Kienholz, the Ohio State backup quarterback. He's going to Louisville next year. He'll have a great running back in Isaac Brown, who was thought to be entering the portal, decided instead to stay at Louisville. So a huge get for the Cardinals. He's one of the best running backs in the country. This one is not guaranteed just yet, but if Trinidad Chambliss, one of the quarterbacks in the college football playoff semifinals, if he gets his waiver approved, he will be sticking at Ole Miss. There's a lot of talk maybe about Chambliss entering the portal and maybe following Lane Kiffin over to LSU. If he gets his waiver approved, which again is not guaranteed just yet, but if he does and he can go back to college football for another year, he will be sticking with Ole Miss instead of entering the portal, potentially reuniting with Lane Kiffin at LSU.
Absolutely. First of all, Louisville getting to keep Isaac Brown and getting to keep, I believe, the linebacker Antonio Watts as well, one of their best playmakers on defense. That's a big, big win there for Jeff Brom, especially Brown on the offensive side, and we can see what they can create in the run game with him and Kienholz back there in the backfield. And then Chambliss is an interesting story, not just for the sake of Ole Miss, and you know, we could go through some of the names specifically, but Pete Golding's done a really good job getting some nice defensive players in there so far in the portal. But if they do get the eligibility waiver approved, then he's going to come back to Ole Miss for another year. And you know what? The way he's playing, you have to think, you know, they feel like they can make the playoff again next year with Chambliss as a quarterback. It also, if it eliminates LSU as an option for him, we saw LSU lose out. They had Brendan Sorsby in for a visit, and he ended up at Texas Tech. LSU's been hot lately on Sam Leavitt, the Arizona State transfer. Have to see if it goes there. I know Kentucky's been in on him as well, but there's a domino effect here with the LSU Tigers and Lane Kiffin trying to find his quarterback. He's brought in a couple of good receivers, especially Jackson Harris from Hawaii, but he needs a point man, and it's not going to be Trinidad Chambliss, it looks like.
No, absolutely. Yeah, Trinidad Chambliss, if he does get to go back to school for another year, which again is not guaranteed just yet because he is right now out of eligibility, but he is applying for a waiver right now. That would be a huge get for Ole Miss. There's a lot of other really interesting signings that we had in the portal as well. Marion Miller, want to shout out to him because Drake Holiday's in chat right now. Marion Miller, a really talented wide receiver, kind of going the Jordan Tyson route, Dalton, going from Colorado to Arizona State. It's worked out before.
Good call. And Cutter Boley from Kentucky is going to be Arizona State's new quarterback as well. That's a big commitment that they got there. He played well down the stretch for the Wildcats, and I think that's going to be a very interesting situation because even when you look at Arizona State's offense, so you got new quarterback, Marion Miller, new big-time receiver going out, but also their top two running backs were Malik Brown and Kanye Udo, both in the portal as well. They got to rebuild the running back room again in Arizona State. So Kenny Dillingham's got a big task in front of him trying to rebuild that offense from what he's had the last couple of years.
Yeah, Trey Wisner, the running back from Texas, he's going over to Florida State. That's a big get, I think, for the Seminoles too. So he has a lot of really interesting player commitments that we've gotten so far, and still so many guys that are still out there available in the transfer portal right now. Obviously, guys like Sam Leavitt is still out there. Cam Coleman is still out there too. Chaz Coleman, Jacarius Peak, who just entered the portal too. You know, we were really desperate to get some better offensive line talent in the portal. Well, he's a really good tackle at NC State right now. John Henry Daly is still available in the portal. Byron Brown, we think, will be going to Auburn, but he is not committed just yet too. So even though we have a ton of guys already committed and signed with their new schools, still a lot of really, really talented players still available in the portal too.
Curious to see more of these quarterbacks. Now, there's a lot of other USF, ex-USF players following Alex Golesh to Auburn, but we've yet to hear officially from Byron Brown if he is doing the same as well. Dylan Raiola, I feel like I've heard nothing at all about him.
And now Louisville's out of the running, it seems like, with Lincoln Kienholz.
DJ Lagway, I believe, already visited Florida State and is soon to visit Virginia. Looking the ACC route with DJ Lagway. So I think there's still, and you mentioned it, obviously the biggest domino, I agree with you, is Sam Levitt. A lot of stories especially are going to come out in the next week about these quarterbacks and where they end up. And as always, that's the shuffle we deal with here. Who gets the best fit at quarterback for their team?
And it feels like for a guy like Sam Levitt, who again is from Oregon, I feel like he's waiting on Dante Moore and seeing what he's going to do first. Because maybe if Dante Moore declares, then he goes to Oregon. Maybe if Dante Moore says, you know what, I'm going back to Oregon for another year, maybe Levitt goes, you know what, instead I'll go to LSU.
And I wonder, too, when there was the talk of Sam Levitt meeting with Will Stein in Kentucky, how much of a relationship they had already built from the Oregon days. But would he turn around and go back and as much, how well does he know Dan Lanning from, those times as well? So it's going to be a lot of fun, I think, to watch this quarterback shuffle with a lot of these top guys, especially. And it seems like they are taking their time. They do have obviously a 2-week window here to really go through several visits and figure out the right fit. We're even seeing that from a receiver like Cam Coleman visiting several big name schools, and obviously he's really a prize at receiver for any team that can go out there and get him. I think you've got some fascinating things that are going to develop over the next few days.
Absolutely. So we're going to continue to cover the transfer portal as much as possible here on this channel as more players enter it and more players, of course, sign with their new schools. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of that. But that kind of wraps up our semifinal preview show. We're actually going to do our semifinal recap and review on the Saturday morning after the games are over. So obviously we have 2 games on Thursday night and on Friday night too. Saturday will be our semifinal recap show. And of course we'll go over any additional transfer portal news that comes out from now until that Saturday show as well. Before our producers back there, and Tyler, Quinn, and Eli for Dalton, Wasserman, I'm Max Chadwick, and we'll see you guys on Saturday with our full recap show for the college football playoff semifinals.